Welcome back to video 3 of a series of virtual lab for anyone interested in setting up a virtual lab for some testing. So this video we will install Windows 10. So in VMware Workstation, you go to File, you say New Virtual Machine. And we're going to go Custom. Leave that alone. We tell all the limitations it has. Next. This one will stay install operating system later. Now you can install it by just choosing the ISO, whatever you want to do. In this case, we'll say install it later. We will choose Microsoft Windows, and we'll choose Windows 10 64. We can name it. And in this case here, the default will go to my user folder. I want to put this in on a different disk. So I have a data disk, VM Lab, and we'll make this folder Windows 10. Call it Lab 3. Next. And you could choose BIOS, or if you like to make it more familiar with the EFI BIOS, which all new computers now have, let's go with the EFI BIOS. Next. Number of processors. Now, if you have a physical machine, you're going to put multiple processors. The problem with multiple processors is licensing. So if you end up putting 8 processors, the operating system may see 8 CPUs and see that that's not correctly for your license. So what you might want to do is do one processor and multiple cores. It doesn't matter because in a VM, it's all considered cores. So you're using virtual CPUs here. So in my case, I have an i7 with 4 core, but it gives me 4 virtual cores on top of that. So I have 8 cores technically available to me. So what I'm going to use is one CPU with 2 cores. So it gives me 2 virtual cores. Next. Now the memory, it gives you a default of 2. Let's go up to 4 just to give it something half decent. So click on that. Or you can just type in 4096 if you'd like. Now you can always upgrade this afterward as well. Next. So this one here, we will choose the bridging, because it will tie it to the network card that you have on your current Windows 10 machine. So it could pick up an IP address from your router in your network. But if you prefer to keep it off your network, you can keep it locally to a NAT. And I will discuss these in a different video as well. Let's go with use bridge. And we'll use the default. And we'll use SCSI disks. It's funny how they don't label SAS disks, but SCSI, you can do that because servers and fast, SCSI are considered a faster interface. Although now SATA, I would say, be even higher. But let's stick with the SCSI recommended interface, the small computer system interface. Now let's create a new virtual disk. If you have a current virtual disk, if you want to take a disk from another VM, you can always choose this. But because we're starting here, the video showing how to do it, let's click with create a new disk. And we'll create 60 gigabyte size, and we'll leave the defaults. Next. Now, before I click next, this here allocate space now. What happens in a VM is you say you want to use 60 gigabytes of space. What happens is it puts a flag saying this file could grow 60 gigabytes in size. What happens when you install Windows, or well, in this case we're installing Windows, it may only use 20. So the size will only be 20 gigabytes on the disk, or a little bit further, a little bit more than that for the overhead and so forth. But it won't use the 60 gigabytes until you get there. So you can actually make it faster by saying allocate the space now. So don't dynamically grow. Just take the 60 gigabytes and make it a file. So if you have disk space to do this, then choose allocate this now. Well, what I do, because I'm in a testing lab, I don't care too much about disk speed. So I just leave it as the dynamic growth. So you can also store it as one big file or multiple files. Now, if you plan on moving this around on a portable drive, take it to a different machine, because you can do that. You can import your VMs on different machines. I would say put it on split, because the files are very large. You may not be able to copy them onto certain file formats. So if you take it to a Mac has HPFS, Windows has NTFS, or Windows file system now, the new one, Windows 10, Windows 2016 has that. Or if you're using FAT32, you may not be able to use the file sizes. So it's a good idea to say split into multiple files. So now you say next, and you name it, name the disk file. I usually leave this as default. And here's just a preview saying what you have. Now, if you want to go back and edit some more, you can customize it and just go in and change things if you want. So I won't change anything else here. Click close, say finish. So this will create the marker file, the VM file right there. It has nothing in it right now. So now we need to turn it on and install the operating system. The first thing we need to do is install a CD. So in a VM world, you're not going to use a physical disk unless you have the physical disk. In this case, I'm going to use an ISO. I'm going to browse, and I'm going to browse out here to E, and this is the file I will use. And this is just a custom Windows 10 all-in-one. I downloaded. I'm testing it. I don't use it as my production. This is something I'm just showing you a video of how to install. So whichever ISO you have when you download from Microsoft Store, or if you have like their trial version, you can use that. So I'm just going to click on the ISO file. So that's an image of a CD technically. So we go OK. And so now it's attached to CD. So that's virtually almost like putting a CD in a machine. Now we want to power it on. And when you first power it on in VMware, it wants to install what they call VM drivers now. So VMware tool drivers, what they do is once you're done installing the operating system, so in this case here, I missed here. I'll just get it back out. Let's reboot here. I'll talk about the VMware drivers. So there you go. So in this case here, this is the VMware BIOS. Now I don't really care to be in here, so I'm going to reboot. I'm just going to wait till I see CD, and I'll talk about the item down at the bottom. So there, I want to press any key, and in this case I want 64-bit Windows. Like I said, this is a custom ISO I'm using. So once you're in there, you could hit the Control-Alt key to get your mouse pointer out. If you click in there, your mouse pointer's stuck in there. I'm going to Control-Alt brings you out. Now on your computer, if you're familiar, if any IT people out there are familiar with hitting Control-Alt-Delete to log into your computer, in a VMware it will say Control-Alt-Delete, but it's actually Control-Alt-Insert. So when you're in this VM, you can actually right-click on here, and you could say send Control-Alt-Delete rather than typing it, and it will put it in here. So as I was mentioning, the VM tools will install drivers. So because you're putting network cards, sound cards, all these items in here, video cards into this Windows version, they're virtual drivers. So the VMware tools will install those drivers and an agent for the VMware software to talk to it. So you could do many things like copy and pasting from your desktop, etc. So without further ado, let's go through the installation. We'll go quickly through this. So I'm just going to say next. All the choices here. Now, if you decide to change them, you can change them. Next, I'm going to install now. And just to take some confusion out here, I'm just going to close these windows here that we're not using. So if you have a product key, you should enter it now. In this case here, I'm going to skip because once you get it installed, you can actually go through that process. But like I said, I'm using a test version here. So let's say I'm going to input home. For further videos, if you're doing this the way to test through this whole video series, if you can, try to use Pro. Because Pro will let this thing join. It will let this machine join a domain, which I'll talk about in a future video. So let's install Windows 10 Pro. So if you are downloading a trial version of Windows 10, or you have a version of Windows 10, I recommend getting Pro because Pro lets you join a domain. So if you're familiar with a domain is picture your family. So you want to join, you want to have another child, you have another child in your family, right? So if you want to put Windows 10 machines in the same family with other servers, you need to connect them to a domain. I'll talk about that in another video. So the licensing terms, goes through, you agree with all their terms, and it goes on forever. If you've never read this, you might want to read it. It's very surprised what's in there. But we do accept the terms. Next. In this case here, we're a brand new first install. We're not upgrading. So we'll say custom install. It shows us our disk, and we'll say next. Now, some people say, well, you should click new so it creates a partition. It doesn't matter if you do that, because saying next, it will do that automatically. So let's go here. So it will copy the files from the CD. And as you see down here, see it's going from the CD or the ISO image, and it's copying to the hard drive. You'll see the lights flashing here. And if it does any network traffic, you'll see some network lights going on if there's any sound. And you can add a webcam, you can add printers, you could do everything. You can actually install USB keys on these. So it's just like a full machine. So the whole idea of having virtual machine is just you're having another computer within your computer without having to buy multiple computers. Or if many of you are familiar with dual booting, so you dual boot into another operating system while you're testing, and then you have to dual boot again back to the original OS or your day-to-day OS. So this is just my test environment. I test things in here, and when I'm done with them, I turn them off. And there, as you see, I have many of them. So let's finish copying files, getting files ready, sent. So this is a time-consuming part of installing Windows. So while it's installing Windows, we'll watch this percentage go up, and we'll just go into an idea of why you would need multiple OSs. So in this case here, I have Windows 10 here. If I want to test a piece of software that a friend says to me, hey, you got to try this piece of software, or you're at work and you're trying to see if something works in Windows 10 because maybe you're upgrading, or perhaps something just released and you're not sure if it'll work, you can install it in here, do all your testing, and then once you're sure, then you can put it on your main machine. Like I said, if your home computer or your lab computer, this one here, if you don't have a specific pieces you need, so you don't want, if you're going to collide with another piece of software, you have, for instance, VMware working, and you want to use VirtualBox, well, sometimes they may collide. Or if you're using Hyper-V, again, they may collide. So for you to test it, you can build a Windows 10 machine and install everything within this Windows 10 machine. And then when you're done testing, you can just turn it off and it doesn't affect your main computer. That's the whole idea of having virtual computers. Let this run. And when you're using a VM, so let's say you're in Windows 10 here and you want this to be full screen because you want it to be bigger, you can just go up here and click full screen. So once the video drivers are installed, this screen will max out to the full size. So you just run your mouse up here and you can bring this menu back down, and now we're just in a windowed view. So you could play with this any way you like to do it, but it won't fully show you the full resolution of your screen unless you install your VM tools. So I'll just right click on here, show you what that means. So let's go to settings. I see how it says install VMware tools. Now you can't do that while the Windows is installing. So let's let Windows install, and let's go over our hardware. So picture you go to the computer store and you buy a machine. You buy the main board, you buy a hard drive, you buy memory, you buy a CPU. So in this case, we bought 4 gigabytes of memory, 2 CPUs, or 1 CPU with 2 cores. And nowadays, I think the Intel i3s, i5s, i7s, they come with dual core, quad core, 8 core. And if you're watching the AMD Ryzens, they have the Threadrippers. So they're going up to 32 processors on a die now. It's getting really nice. This is where virtualization thrives, because your computer will probably not use the resources. So in a server environment, if you have a physical machine with all these cores sitting there and your computer's sitting there for 80% of the time just sitting idle. So if you use virtualization, you could put multiple computers on that physical computer to make use of the system. and make better use of the system and optimize the system to use it to its full potential. So as we show here, we have a hard drive of 60 gigabytes. Now, later on, I can expand that. So right now it's grayed out because it's being used, but if I turn this machine off, I can expand the drive and make it bigger. CD-ROM, that's the one I connected. Now, if I disconnect this right now, it would break the install. Network is bridged adapter. Now, what bridged is connects it directly to the physical on the physical adapter on my laptop. So in my case, I'm using a Dell XPS 15 for my lab. So the Dell XPS 15 network card is wireless right now, so I'm utilizing this wireless adapter, and I'm getting a different IP for this machine. So on my physical machine, I have one IP, and when this one fires up, it will have its own IP. So it'll be on the same network as my physical machine. If I use NAT, that will use the IP address of my machine and on the same network. So it'll utilize everything from the computer, just pass everything through really. And then the host only, you can actually take it off the network. So if you're testing something that you want to test in a VM but not live on your network because you don't want it to collide with other things, then what you do is you put it in host only. And you can do custom as well and change your own network ID, so forth. USB controller, I'm using USB 3 in here. I could change it to anything I want. USB 3, which means if I plug in a USB 3 USB stick into my computer, my physical laptop, it will map it into here as if I plugged it into the VM. The sound card is the standard sound card. It's going to use the Realtek, and choose what sound card you want or the default VMware sound card. Printer, if I'm using a printer, I can actually connect virtual printers, but right now I don't have it enabled because I'm not too worried about printers in my VM. And display, you can turn on 3D graphics. You can also turn on multiple monitors. So if you have a VM that you want 2 monitors, you can actually set up to have 2 monitors. And you can allocate a certain amount of graphics memory to it. So when you go buy like an NVIDIA video card and it has 4 gigabytes of RAM, you can do that inside a VM as well. So those are the base functions. Let's go to options. So I'm just going through this as you see while we're installing. So rather than having just dead air sitting here, and I don't want to fast forward it because I want to just show you the whole process. So general, we have the name. You can change the name if you want. If you decide maybe you might want to go call this test. Three. Okay. And it's powered on right now, so I can't change what operating system it is. So that's the way it is. Here's the working directory. And if you have an enhanced keyboard, you can turn it on if you wish. Power, you can tell it what to do when you power it on. So if you want it to go full screen when you're powering on, do this. You want it to close after powering off. So when you do that, it will close the VM after suspending. The good thing with this, if I decide I'm getting tired, I want to walk away and come back to it later, or it's the end of the workday and you're doing a test at work, you could pause it and we'll pause the install. And then when you come back to it the next time, you can turn it on and resume the install. So this is kind of nice for testing. You can actually pause it and resume it whenever you feel like it. So shared folders lets you actually connect from the VM to your desktop. So because remember, these are technically 2 different computers. So you can actually tell this how to map to certain places on your physical machine to get data directly. So if you're trying to put some software on these, like you're trying to install Office or something, you have an ISO, you can connect this into your map drives of your PC. Now snapshots, here's where the fun begins. So in each VM you create, you can have a snapshot. So snapshot when powering off, you can say just power off, or when you could say take a snapshot every time I power this thing off because I changed something. Now in a live environment, you wouldn't want to do that because the more snapshots you make, the more Delta copies it has. What a snapshot does is, let's say you get a piece of software like a patch from Microsoft, or a piece of software you're trying to install, and you install it and like everything broke. You want to back it out. Well, you can just go back to your snapshot and say revert to a previous snapshot. So it will then revert to previous to you installing the software before it blew up and before it killed Windows. So again, this is why it's a great test environment. You can take snapshots anytime you wish. Now, snapshots are not backups. if you want to back up your machine, you should use something like Veeam Backup. There is a Veeam Windows Agent Backup. I think it's free. There's plenty of other software out there as well, but you can do that. Take a full backup of your VM another way. The snapshots are just more for taking a point. It's like taking a snapshot in this point in time. You took a snap, and so everything you've done up to that point is being held. And from this point forward, it makes a separate file. So every change you make gets put into a separate file. And when at the end of it all, when you decide you want to keep it, you can actually merge them together, or you can just dump them. So if you decide to go back, you could delete it. If you decide to merge them together, then you're fine. You can do that. So then it becomes one again. So that's the whole idea of snapshots. Then you can enable auto protect. I usually leave it disabled because I don't use it, especially in a test environment. You don't need to play with this. Guest isolation. Now, isolation, you can enable drag and drop. So if I take something from my computer, I could drag it. Let's say if I have a folder, I could drag it and drop it in here. It allows you to do that. Copy and paste. You can say copy and then paste in here, which is good. So it allows you to take things from one computer to the other computer seamlessly. And that's what guest isolation allows. So another one is access control. You can actually encrypt the VM if you like, so nobody else can get into it. If someone copies a file, they can't get into it unless they have the key. VM tools. Again, you can set up time sync, so this way you can make sure the time clock on your computer out here, your physical machine, is the same in the VM. VNC, if you use VNC, you can also connect into it. So if you want to connect from your machine right into VNC through this, you could turn it on. It has an agent built in to do so. Now Unity, where this comes in handy is, let's say you have a Windows 7 machine or a piece of software that only works on Windows 7. Or let's go way back to Windows XP. You have a piece of software that will not work in Windows 7 or Windows 10, and you cannot move it off of Windows XP, and you can't get rid of it yet. So you can actually set up a Windows XP VM. I wouldn't anymore because it's no longer supported, but just an example. You could put a piece of software on a Windows XP VM and say Unity, and what that will do is on your Windows 10 machine, on your start button, it will show the icons of that software as if it's unified into one machine. In the background, it's going to run all of the application in the VM, but for the user on this machine, the main machine, it will just look like it's all in the same operating system. So this is one way to use software on an operating system that's not supported, on the software that's not supported on your current operating system like Windows 10. You can then set it up in a VM and make a Unity connection to it. Now there's also other things where you can set up appliances and make it connect to it. Auto login, you can set up users for auto login. That's something that the VMware product allows, so you can have it auto log on as you, so you don't have to worry about typing in passwords for every VM. I don't really turn that on, but this is why I did a custom install Windows 10 here. So. And advanced, you go into the other functions, so input grabbed. Right? You could change settings here. So I always leave them as default because there's no point changing them. Settings, debugging information. I don't play with the debugging at the moment, but you could turn these on to capture other information, and it does keep logs in these folders. So within the VM itself. So that's pretty much all the settings you would do in your VM that you're setting up. Now we're sitting at 85%. I am running my machine pretty tough right now, so that's why you see the odd time you'll see not responding. So I'll cancel this task to cut down some of the tasks. Let's go back here and let's watch this grow a little more. 86%. So like I said, we will, at the end of the install, we'll run the VM tools to make sure that has the latest drivers. It will fix everything up so Windows has its drivers for its virtual hardware. So we'll go up here to explain a little more inside it. So when we created in VMware Workstation, we created a new virtual machine. From there, we created the file, and the file created platform, and we run the CD, and we're installing Windows now. So there's plenty of ways to create VMs. You can download templates. You can download, if you go out, they're called OVAs. And OVAs are images that people make. So if you want to install a piece of software that somebody else, you export OVF, you can export these out or you can import them in. So if let's say for instance Raspberry Pi. Now I didn't build this one. I just grabbed an image somebody created. And when I grabbed it, I downloaded it and just imported it into VMware. So you can find a lot of VMware appliances already created, a lot of things already installed. So if you are looking to test things, you can do a lot of testing inside of here. So this is one way to have your VM lab. I've always had a VM lab on my Windows machine. When I had a Mac, same idea. One thing I like about the Mac is when you have your screen, full screen, you can use your 3 fingers and slide left and right to slide back and forth between the Mac to your VM. So if you have 5 VMs open, you could slide 4 times over to your other VMs using your 3 fingers touchpad. I haven't tried it on my Dell yet, but because I use 2 full monitors, so my Dell's actually sitting off the side, and I use a full keyboard and mouse with this setup right now at my desk. But when I am portable, I do use my touchpad. We're almost at 95 here, so we're almost done. Hopefully this can fire through here. So as you can see, Windows does take a few minutes to install. But once you have it, you can clone it, you can copy it, you can leave it, snapshot it, anything you want to do for your test environment. So when you're playing with this, you have the full functionality to blow it up pretty much and not worry about your operating system is sitting out here. But we could also put in other mechanisms in here, so we could put other VMs in. So if I want to put Linux in, I can install Linux at the same time. But I'm going to create these videos one by one just to show you how we actually install them. So as you see, I'm clicking through and you can see the different virtual machines. So these are virtual machines. There's just no hardware. It's utilizing all my hardware on my system I'm using now on my Dell. And sometimes what happens is, I'm not sure if you hear it in the background, but my fans kick in pretty hard when I'm pushing a lot of videos. I'm actually running my OBS and video recording right now. My mic is running, that's plugged in, and I'm also running a VM with VMware Workstation. So the computer sometimes does a little momentarily hang, and I think it's probably just some optimization I need to do, but I have done this exact same thing on a Mac. So here we are ready for our first restart. We're restarting this VM, and as I told you, I moved my mouse and it's stuck in there, so you hit Control-Alt to get out, and now you have the mouse again. So it boots up to VMware, and it will probably show, nope, it skips right by it. I was going to say it probably show hit a key to install the OS, but it skips by that now because EFI BIOS sees the boot drive is the first drive to go to. So we are booting up into Windows for the very first time here. A little spinner. But like I said, a VM lab you don't have to have speed here, right? You're not trying to run this thing to see if you can run Photoshop inside of a VM. You're just trying to test it to see if maybe it works, or you just want to see how it works. If you're learning a new operating system, you could do this. If you're trying to test something that you're trying to proof of concept, you could do that inside of a VM. You know, depending on your hardware, if you have a lot of memory and a lot of CPU and a fast disk and lots of disk space, you could play with it as much as you want in here. That's one good thing about VMware, the product I do like. I use VMware Virtual Center in my office, and I've been using this since 2006. So it's been many years on the VMware platform. I do enjoy it. I prefer it. Microsoft platform is definitely getting more and more mature every day. People argue what's better. I think it's more what you're comfortable with, not what's better, because they all have their function. Again, I'm really comfortable with VMware side of things, so I'm biased about it. But the other product, the Oracle VirtualBox, is a nice product to use too. But that'll be another video. This is just to get the Windows 10. Once we get installed here, it's almost done. Once it's up and running, it shows you a Windows 10 machine is actually running on Windows 10. This is Windows 10 here. Let that run, and I'll bring up a control panel to show you. second window here. So show you here, my system here, I'm using 20 gigabytes of RAM, Windows 10 Home, and Core i7. And I'm running 8 processors, so hyper-threaded. So I got 4 core with 4 more hyper-thread. So I have 8 cores available, and I have 20 gigabytes of RAM. So that's my resources I have to use for my virtualization. Now, if you want to take a look at how much my system's running right now, my task manager, I'm showing 31% CPU, but see how it's bouncing all over the place? I'm running this main OS, recording the video. I have a few web pages open on my other screen. As you see, I have OBS running. It's 7.9, so it's not really eating up too many resources. But look at VMware. The VMware is using 1% CPU. It's hardly anything while it's doing what it's doing over here. You can see it running, right? The GPU is doing a lot using OBS because I'm recording my video. Of course, it's going to. Memory, it's using more memory because the video is recording. My Chrome uses more memory than my VM. And yet I've allocated 4 gigabytes of RAM to VM. So you can see as it's climbing, as the system's building, as it says getting ready, you will see this start to climb once the OS starts. But again, it's dynamic, so it uses memory as it goes. It doesn't just take the whole 4 gigabytes. There is a way to force it to take it, so it has it to reserve it. In a large scale environment, you definitely want to do that. But as you see, I'm not using too much. So if I go performance, I can see my CPU, right? 8 logical cores. So everything's running really good. So I'm running 16%. Disk is running pretty good. When it writes the other disk is just a SSHD. So it's not an SSD, it's a hard drive with a little bit of SSD cache. And I use that because I want space. I don't want speed. I don't care about speed too much over there. So as you see, my processor isn't growing too high yet, but yet the VM is still running. So this just shows that my system can do it. It can definitely run everything it needs. Right, there's my Wi-Fi. Video card. This laptop I have is, like I said, it's a Dell XPS 15. It has an Intel video card and an NVIDIA video card. I've told my OBS Studio to utilize the NVIDIA. So get rid of this. So now here we are. We're trying to boot up. Now, it doesn't happen that often. Sometimes when I overuse the resources on the computer, the VM will take a while. So again, it's not perfect. No virtual environment is, but it just depends on how much you're doing. Because I'm recording a video and doing this, I'm robbing a lot of CPU time and memory. So this possibly could become a secondary task for the CPU because my video recording is definitely the first task. So as it's getting ready, it's ready for the fire up for the very first time. And if you've ever installed Windows 10, you've seen these screens before. So in a virtual environment, it's no different. It's not like it changes. It's a different type of Windows. It's the same Windows. The difference is this one doesn't have a physical main board, so it doesn't have a physical case underneath your desk. It doesn't have a main board. It's using memory from the physical machine. But in Windows case here, when Windows being installed, it sees it as its own computer. It doesn't see it as, oh, it's riding on something else. It's actually its own computer. Let this finish. So this is how you set up a Windows 10 machine on your virtual platform. So in my virtual lab now, I have a Windows 10 machine and I can do anything I want inside there for my testing. And we'll close these because we have them right now. Doesn't matter if they're open here or closed. Oh, So Windows 10 is now installed. Place my mouse again. Oh yes, I have my mouse and the mouse is there. This lets me do anything else I want to do. At this point here, Windows is doing this little thing, and we'll let it catch up. And as you see, these are my VMs. I have one powered on, and all the others are powered off. And give it a second to catch up. And the emphasis here is speed. So if you're looking to do heavy duty items, like you're trying to do video recording, you're trying to do edited video and render things and do all these 3D rendering heavy CPU intense things or memory intense things, you may not want to run that stuff in a VM. Not saying it can't do it, it just depends on the hardware you're putting at it. So me, I've only allocated 4 gigabytes of RAM. Because I have 20 available on my machine, I could bump this up to 16 if I want and leave 4 left for the physical machine. But 4 is perfect for testing. Same with the CPU. Disk, expand those anytime I want. The Windows is now booting again because it's done its first reboot. You should see the start button and log on prompt any second now. So hopefully you're following through the series. I'm hoping to keep the series going to maybe 10 videos, 15 videos possibly, just to show all the different scenarios. Most of it will probably fall into the lines of people who are in IT who are looking to build a lab and test things because they're under pressure to run the latest OSs, maybe move things up from old servers, and basically gives you a testing ground to test to see if you have a website that you're trying to move up, like old ASP website or something, into the new web server. So this is how I always do my testing. So this is what's good about having a virtual lab. Go spinner. Sit here in anxiety, waiting for this boot up finally to load up. And I've seen this on physical machines do it for a long time. Sometimes it just takes a little longer to install, and I think it's because of disk activity. So just to show you that again, I think my disk is running pretty high. So that's why this is running a little slower, because the video is actually recording onto disk, the same disk actually. I should have changed that. But yeah, it's running on the same disk as the VM. So as it says, the VM's not getting any space. Right, so there you go. Sorry, VM's not getting any time slices to the hard drive. Let's close this. So now it says it's time to enter the product key because we have to register. So if you don't have the key at this moment, you can say do this later, and you can register afterward. So here we go. We go through the settings. So let's say use Express for now because we don't really care about going through how to install Windows, just how to do it in a VM. So again, now it's creating my profile. So it is quite a process to install Windows. And my other videos in the series, they may be long, but at least they take you through the whole series, and my explanations to it will help you understand a little further. So if you do get stuck or something happens, just wait it out if it takes a little longer. Sometimes you notice during the installs it takes a little time, but then next time you turn it on, it's like right there, it's perfect. Because sometimes the installs, because it's pushing the hard drive. Again, I'm doing several things at once right now, so my hard drives are running pretty strong. So now it's giving me a profile. So this says waiting, it's working on it, it's doing critical updates. So now this is yet another piece of the install. It goes out to Microsoft's website to download the Windows updates. Now you could prevent this by just going here and you go to settings. You can prevent this by turning off the network adapter. And if you turn off the network adapter, That will stop it from going out getting updates. So hopefully I didn't crash it. But basically that's like going to the back of your computer and unplugging your network cable. We'll see if that speeds that up. So what we'll do, just to avoid issues, I'll go back in, see how it's not connected. I'll connect it again. So, because the whole idea of this video is to show the whole process of installing Windows inside of a virtual platform. So this is my virtual lab. So now I have a Windows 10 machine for my lab. I have a Windows 2016 server for my lab. A Mac for my lab. I have an Android machine for my lab and a Raspberry Pi system for my lab. And the videos I'm creating in this series, I will create a Linux server for your lab, a Linux desktop for your lab, another Windows Server 2012, another Windows 2016. We'll go through a domain controller, setting up a cluster. So if you want to set up a Hyper-V environment inside of this, or a VMware environment inside of this platform, that will all be part of this virtual lab setup. Says it takes a while, and it's not joking. It does take a while. That's all part of the Windows install. So again, we could just do this, see if it takes a full screen. So it hasn't taken a full screen yet because it hasn't installed the Windows drivers yet. Take it out of full screen for a second. Installing the updates it downloaded. Now this is also important. Don't turn off your machine when you're downloading updates, because what happens when it's installing the updates, it could be replacing core items inside your operating system. And when it does that, if you turn off your machine, it may have deleted the one to replace the other, or maybe renaming them so it can go back and pull out the patch or the update should something go wrong. So it's a good idea not to turn off your machine until you get all the tasks done. I haven't tried it during the install, but you could probably pause it at this point. I don't want to pause it because I want this to finish. Video done. But you could go in and pause this. You could suspend it. You could restart it. You could do anything you want. So it's almost done. Install. So just going through the other tabs. See, it shows tabs. We have the home, my computer, Windows. That's basically what these are tabs. And this is, you can close the library over here. So you go there and you got nothing. So we want to go tabs, and we want to do is go here. There's the home, Windows 10. So we want to go to view, and we want to customize the view, and we want to turn the library back on. Just go there. So should you not want the library, you can get rid of the library. Well, what's good about this is if you have multiple VMs, you can actually do a search. We're almost done here, hopefully. Get Windows installed. Of course, it's still working. I think they should start off with dirt on the screen, and as it goes further, have grass slowly growing out of the ground. There you go. So now it's doing another. It's probably rebooting because it's got to apply the patches, or it's probably restarting services. See what happens here. So far, I've counted 2 reboots during the install. See if this reboots or just goes back. Log on screen. Booting, or are we just... There we go. So it's reboot. So it reboots the machine. VMware computer. Goes through the process. There's Windows loading. Should see the little spinner here in a second. And like I said, once you get everything installed, everything will pick up speed because now you have the proper drivers in. You'll have everything running. It'll be connected to your network. So this is a complete process of no speeding up the video, nothing here. This is the whole time it takes to build this VM. It's usually about an hour, I would say, to install Windows, get it set up, and be finished with everything you need from moving forward. Now, with this, I will also let you know, I don't run any other virus scanners. I just run all the basics inside of my VMs. Now, if you're using these things in an office and you have policies that state you should have a virus scanner, definitely follow them. Make sure you have a virus scanner on your main machine. This just helps you protect your machines. Here we are, waiting for it to boot. Get the initial login screen after all the patches have been installed. Hopefully this thing is right up to date. Patching. And this is Windows 10 64. We're installing on February 13th, 2018. Happens to be about 2:01 in the morning. So hopefully this just a moment is only a moment. Now what we'll do is we'll say I finished installing. This way it gets rid of that screen. Because once we get there, I'll show you how to install the VM tools. Just waiting for everything to start up. As you can see, the disk and the CD is still working. 2 monitors are showing. Audio is showing. And again, if I plugged in a webcam, it would let me use it into VM if I wanted to. Okay, so here we are. So, okay, who owns this computer? I own it. Next. And I want to use skip this step because I don't really have a Microsoft account for this. So who's going to use this this PC? So let's make it simple. There you go. So in my test lab, I usually use a standard password for all my test machines. Nothing related to my passwords externally. This way, if I give my VMs to another person to test on, they can do that. Now it's got my profile created. It says hi to me. There's my new desktop, and I should have the start button up any second. So now it's setting up my default profile. That's what it is, and you can see what it's doing here. It's writing to the disk. Like I said, at the moment, the disk is running pretty hard. So it's writing here. My recording right now is also writing to the hard drive. So again, this may or may not be a different speed for you. If it's more speed, then it's because you have faster hardware. And in my case, the drive I'm using is a little slower, but it's just for my testing, so I don't really care about how fast it is. Wait for this again. It says it won't take long. If you've ever seen a file copy in Windows and it says it's taking 3 minutes, but it actually takes 9 minutes. Sometimes it takes 1 hour and it says 20 minutes and then 3 hours. So I don't know how Microsoft tells time, but won't take long. Maybe that's a good explanation. So basically it's setting up now the basic applications on your profile. If you don't understand what a profile is, basically what happens in Windows is it creates a folder of you. So you're logging on, in this case, I'm logging on as a user named CompuGuy, and it's going to give me the Windows folder. It's going to give me the applications that are on the computer that everyone uses. It's building my start menu right now, and it's building my default color scheme, my mouse, all those things it's building. So that's why it takes a few minutes, because it's actually copying a profile from the original profile, like a default profile, to my name. And then once I get building it, it will then be more custom. That's why this takes a while, and that's what a profile is. Here we go. Let's start. So I should get the start button now, the famous Windows 10. There we are. So sound is disabled. There it is. It's enabled. Now I'm on my network, so I say yes. I want to allow my computer to be on the network and let it be discovered, because if I want my physical computer to connect to it, I can. Now what I'm going to do here is just type CMD and bring up a command line, and I want to show you something. So I have an IP address here, and that's this computer. So, and there's the default host name for this computer. That's the name of the computer. So I'll leave that alone for now. Now what we want to do is we want to go outside here now, right click and say install VMware tools. So now we'll click on the folder here, and you will see the DVD drive VMware tools. Now it should automatically open up. This is what you want to do with this. I want to run it. Say yes. Now Windows 10 pops up saying, hey, are you aware this is happening? And you have to say yes. And if it has to have elevated privileges, you have to say yes as well. So this is what it's doing now. It's installing all the drivers. So the easiest way to see this, so we go to the control panel. Give it a minute because it is catching up. It's running its drivers right now. So let that run in a backdrop. So now what it's going to do is pull up all my settings. I'm going to go to settings and show you the drivers that Windows is currently installing. Let's go to category small, icons. Let's go to system. Now see how it says 4 gigs of RAM, 64-bit processor. I'm using Intel. Let's go to device manager. And I see VMware tools. I'm going to install. Now see how you have base system driver, nothing there. So I'm going to install the drivers. I just wanted to do that while this was waiting to install. So now it's installing the drivers, and you'll see that driver will get a proper file now. So this will go away. Let's see what happens. So while you're doing that, I'm just going to open up the processor. See how it's only 2 CPUs? That's because I told the hardware 4 gigs RAM, 2 CPU. So 2 CPU, click back here, 4 gig of RAM. So that's the hardware I gave it. There you go. So you see now the drivers are installing, and it installed the drivers. So now that base system driver is now installed. This is the virtual drivers, right? The Windows updates is still happening. Just gonna minimize that. And now you've seen what I've showed you here. I'll just close that. So there's the video drivers. Close that. Let this finish. Now once this finishes, this is the removing backup files. It extracts a bunch of temp files. That's why it took a little bit when I clicked on install. It extracted them to a separate folder, a temp folder. And now that the random installer, now it's actually removing those files. So once it's done, that's our Windows 10 install. So that's how you install Windows 10. And if it was a different operating system, it'd be a different, very similar. If it's Windows, it'd be a very similar screen setup, very similar following through the install. I'll show you Linux on another install. I'll show you how to set up a Mac. But I will show them in this series of videos. So this video was the Windows 10 Lab 3 set up in the virtual lab part 3. So there we go, finish. Once you finish, it wants to reboot. So I will say no for now because we don't want to. and I don't want to upgrade the OneDrive right now because of the video that we're running. But that's how you run Windows 10 install. Now we have Windows 10, we can use it for our test purposes. So thank you for watching. Stay tuned for the next video. I believe we'll do a Linux install the next video for Lab 4. So thank you for watching. See you next time.